Hello and welcome to Keep It Classical. Earlier this summer, hip-hop artist T-Pain did an interview for the Netflix show This Is Pop, and shared how a comment by Usher sent him into a 4-year-long depression. Basically, Usher went out of his way to meet up with T-Pain on a plane and tell him that he has been ruining music. Now, just as a refresher, if you don't know who T-Pain is or what kind of music he makes, he took autotune, which is normally used to try and help pop stars hit notes without having to do weeks and weeks and weeks of retakes. He turned it all the way up to the maximum speed and turned it into a stylized vocal effect. Getting back to the question at hand, is Usher right? Did T-Pain ruin music? And another important question is, why am I talking about this on a classical music channel? First, music is music, and I believe it's important to stay topical regarding music. One of the biggest criticisms that I hear about classical music is that it seems completely oblivious to music being written and listened to today, or in this case, over a decade ago. Second, hearing this reminded me about all the times in music history where people have said that one thing or another is ruining music. And this seems like as good a time as any to go back and review all of those moments. It's important to remind each other that this is not the first time, nor will it be the last, that someone or something has been accused of ruining music. We have been saying this for hundreds of years. In the course of my research, I found a really great infographic from the blog Proper Discord that was compiled for The New Yorker, and I found some really great quotes on it. So let's get started. Monteverdi. Monteverdi was an Italian composer who began writing music that challenged the status quo. Dissonance was always a thing in music, but rather than preparing the dissonance like composers before him, Monteverdi would bring them in at unexpected times, he would relish them, and he would use them for text emphasis. This became known as seconda pratica, or second practice. Of this, music critic Giovanni Maria Artusi said, "Such composers, in my opinion, have nothing but smoke in their heads if they are so impressed with themselves as to think that they can corrupt, abolish, and ruin at will the good old rules handed down from the days of old by so many theorists and excellent musicians. In the end, since they lack a good foundation, they are eaten away by time and fall to the ground." I mean, tell us how you really feel, Giovanni. But here's the thing, Monteverdi wrote in both styles throughout his career. He wasn't trying to replace anything, and in the end, music actually went in a different direction altogether. Figured bass. Figured bass is sort of a shorthand notation for keyboard players during the Baroque epoch. It contains a single line with a single note, shared by the bass string players, and a series of numbers that indicate the intervals above that bass note. Using these notes with these intervals, keyboardists were able to create accompanying parts to help fill out the ensemble sound. It's an incredible skill set that requires a sharp mind, great motor skills, and a lot of practice. But like so many other things on this list, it seems that it's threatening an already established practice. Because it's easy to play from basso continuo, many organists nowadays are highly successful in concerto playing, but in their great vanity, on account of their sureness in playing with others, they give little thought to exerting themselves in improvisation and playing from the score. Whereas it is in this domain that many a good man has made himself immortal. Basically, musicians nowadays have it so easy and can't even compare to the masters that came before them. Also, I'm not sure if you're aware, but there's lots of incredible keyboard players today, many who can improvise exceptionally well. The violin. Yeah, the violin, right? Even the violin, which seems almost quintessentially classical, was once despised in some music circles. According to Abbé Hubert Leblanc, the violin, with its shrill and overbearing sound, displaced his beloved viola da gamba in string music. Today, however, the violin makes up the largest group of instruments in an orchestra. Violinists make up around a third of the entire orchestra. Beethoven. Beethoven has had no shortage of criticism, either during his time or after. His music was loud, shocking, bombastic, and in many ways experimental. It demanded attention. So it only makes sense that a composer who pushed the envelope as much as Beethoven would also be accused of ruining music. The effect which the writings of Beethoven have had on the art must, I fear, be considered injurious. Thus, music is no longer intended to soothe, to delight, to wrap the senses in Elysium. It is absorbed in one principle: to astonish. Kind of a narrow way to look at music, as something that should only inspire one affect. Heaven forbid that music should do anything more than soothe and delight. The piano. Not to be outdone by the violin, the piano also faced criticism regarding its existence. The forte piano was kind of like the grandfather to the modern day piano. It was a portable instrument, it wasn't very loud, and it didn't stay in tune. Also, it didn't have that many keys. Over the course of the 1800s, the piano evolved and grew into an absolute monster of an instrument. It became reinforced with cast iron framing, it was given multiple strings for the higher pitches, and it was expanded to include 88 keys. It became a much louder instrument, and with these changes, it wasn't well received by everyone. This eternal piano playing is too much to bear. This shrill tinkling with no natural resonance, this heartless whirring, this ultra-prosaic banging and pecking. The forte piano is killing all our thoughts and feelings, and we are becoming stupid, dull, imbecilic. This prevalence of piano playing is characteristic of our time and bears witness to the victory of machine over spirit. If this guy thinks that the piano is a victory of machine over spirit, I really don't want to see his reaction to Facebook. The player piano. Now, if the piano wasn't killing music on its own, here comes the player piano to really seal the deal. John Philip Sousa said about the player piano, "I foresee a marked deterioration in American music and musical taste, an interruption in the musical development of the country, and a host of other injuries to music in its artistic manifestation, by virtue or by vice of the multiplication of the various music reproducing machines." I think it's rich that John Philip Sousa is lecturing anyone about musical taste. The gramophone. As technology like sound recording kept advancing, so did the critics. And almost immediately after the invention of the gramophone, somebody started fearing the worst about it. American symphony orchestras are threatened by this widespread epidemic of canned music. Our symphony orchestras are national institutions, and their passing would spell a terrible loss to the country. Professional musicians are responsible for the art of their music, and if their services are no longer required, there will be no incentive for them to cultivate their talent. Musical genius will be a thing of the past. The compact disc. Now, considering the pushback and flack that the gramophone got, you can expect that any advancement in sound recording will be equally as vitriolic. In 1996, American composer John Adams composed a piece called Scratch Band. But no one owns a legal recording of the music. He simply has been at a loss for more than a decade when it comes to identifying a major symphonic work or concerto that Scratch Band would make sense next to on an 80-minute CD. It's time someone said it. The cult of the CD is throttling discovery and enjoyment of a new concert music to an unacceptable degree. This was written in 2009, but iTunes was in its heyday. Spotify and YouTube weren't quite established platforms yet. Speaking of, YouTube. That's right, the thing that you're watching right now has been accused of ruining music. Are you really surprised? It's kind of like that Shel Silverstein poem of a guy eating himself. Kind of feels like a Twilight Zone moment, doesn't it? Christian Zimmerman, a Polish pianist, reportedly stormed off of a stage saying, quote, "The destruction of music because of YouTube is enormous," after he caught an audience member filming his performance on their phone. I should note that in Europe, recording a concert on your phone is a big faux pas. But he's conflating people recording live performances on their phones with him losing record deals. It's a huge oversimplification of the issue. I can understand how it's a seismic shift in the way that music is being listened to, but ruining it? Not so much. If anything, it's cracking wide open the distribution of classical music. But again, it's a deeper issue and we are oversimplifying it. By the way, money was mentioned on this list 6 times. Which I guess makes sense because most musicians don't get paid what they're worth. I mean, we'll get to this in a second, but if there's anything that could ruin music, it's money. Lack of money. Lack of musicians getting paid. Just putting that out there. Which brings us to T-Pain. Considering everything we've just talked about, is it even possible for T-Pain to ruin music? Simply put, no. Nothing can ruin something so impervious as music. Whenever you hear anyone say that something is ruining anything, what they mean to say is that thing is threatening the status quo, or that thing is getting in the way of what I'm trying to do. Now maybe it affects the way that you've always seen and heard music, but remember, music was here long before you, and it'll be here long after you're gone. And remember, whatever you're listening to now was probably a corruption of whatever came before it. If you weren't aware, T-Pain is an incredible singer. He doesn't need autotune in order to sing.
Baby girl, what's your name? Let me talk to you, let me buy you a drink, and then I'm T-Pain. You know me, convict music, nappy Bowie. I know the club.
So if he's such a great singer, then why does he use it? In the Netflix series, he describes its use as his desire to stand out in an already crowded field of R&B artists.
And then I decided to make my own album, but it was just my voice. And I was like, this is not making me different from anybody else. I wanted to sound different.
And that overcorrected, plasticky, robotic sort of aesthetic was one that he had been searching for specifically.
I just wanted to find it. Anything that had the word vocal or anything that had the word Vox on it, I was buying it. And one day, man, I got 3 DVDs. I went through every single one. Not only did I go through every plugin, I went through every preset of each plugin. So that took a long time. Oh boy, when I found that autotune, I cried a little bit.
And while T-Pain's name has become synonymous with autotune, he didn't invent it, and it was widely used before he took it and turned it up to 11. He took that sound and dropped it into a genre that makes sense and found an audience that wanted to listen to it. Now, maybe that style continues and maybe it goes away. It all depends on what audiences choose to listen to. So no, T-Pain did not ruin music, because nothing can ruin music. Music will be what it is no matter who molds it. That's all for now. Thank you so much for watching. If you're interested in more, you should watch my video on what is and isn't classical music. It was one of my first videos, so do be kind, but the information is still good. In the meantime, keep it classical.